Hello, everybody, and welcome to our first State of the Arts Library Lightning Talks on Art Librarianship event. Very exciting to have so many of you here, so thank you all very, very much for joining us today. Just letting in one of our speakers. I'm Leah. I'm one of the co-chairs of ARLIS South West, and I'll be introducing each of our fantastic speakers today. And to start us off, I just wanted to say a little bit about State of the Arts Library and why we wanted to put it together. This is an event designed to inspire, to educate, and to celebrate, with the talks providing an opportunity for professionals in their field to share their work, their collections, and their teaching, as well as illustrating the depth, variety, and changing landscape of art librarianship. There's a lot of exciting work going on in the Southwest, and we want to find ways to showcase it. We have 4 speakers today: Suzanna, José, Alan, and Ludo, and they'll be talking about teaching with Visionaire and the Japanese Photo Library at Arts University Bournemouth, delivering a specialist creative researchers programme at the University of South Wales, and dealing with perceived offensive resources in the Arts Library at UWE Bristol. So, without further ado, and to hopefully keep us to time, I will pass over to our first speaker, Suzanna.
Hello everyone, I'm Susie Hall. I'm a subject librarian for fashion at the Arts University Bournemouth. My talk today focuses on fashion publication that comes from outside of mainstream publishing and the opportunities and challenges these pose to academic libraries, with a special focus on Visionaire as both a precursor to and a model for thinking about an increasing trend towards highly visual and format shifting fashion publication. By way of context, I wanted to say a little bit about the collections here at AUB. You'll get a little bit more information from my colleague Alan when he talks a little bit later. As a specialist arts library, we're pretty comfortable with more unusual formats. We have a collection of artist books and the materials library, both housed separately from our more traditional book stock. Fashion magazines have traditionally been catalogued as journals and shelved accordingly. But what I'm increasingly finding is that these marginal fashion publications are developing into kind of unruly objects, in the same way that a lot of this other material is, and are starting to warrant the same kind of special consideration. To explain why this drift in fashion publishing presents a challenge to libraries, I'm afraid I have to talk about Roland Barthes. The French cultural theorist wrote extensively about fashion, most notably in his 1967 book, The Fashion System. Barthes argues that images of clothing are often ambiguous on their own and require accompanying text to tell the reader what to think or feel about them. Text acts as an anchor, fixing the meaning of the image and expressing what the image cannot communicate by itself. And I think for a lot of us, that reflects our general understanding of what a fashion magazine actually is. So as to picture one, most of us would conjure something like Vogue, glossy pages, high-end photography with written articles. As Barthes says, text and image work them together. But contemporary fashion publishing is moving in a much different direction, increasingly prioritizing image over text. Much of this material comes directly from the brands themselves and is therefore more an expression of fashion than a commentary just on it. A good example of this is on the screen. It's a publication called A Magazine Curated By. It's a fashion magazine where each issue is compiled and designed by a different fashion designer or creative director. Issues are often almost entirely image-based, and images, moreover, that push at the boundaries of what fashion photography is expected to be in more commercially driven publications. Very few images of clothes are found here. It's more a reflection of one particular designer's ideas and inspirations, and so becomes interesting as a design document in this way. Then there are publications that in their content, text and image still behave like magazines, but whose physical format shifts from issue to issue. So the object itself looks less and less like a conventional fashion mag. So this on the screen is Viscose, a magazine that reinvents its format with every issue. The first was a bagazine. It's a magazine that looks like a bag. The third was a fan. Each issue's form responds directly to its theme, with recent issues exploring sound, which looked like a vinyl record sleeve, and scent, which looked like the flat lay for perfume packaging. Two very different publications, but both illustrative of a broader shift in fashion publishing towards work produced outside of traditional publishing systems and formats. This territory is explored at some length in the new book by Laura Gardner, which I've put up on the screen, on marginal fashion publishing. And it's something that I'm quoted in, which is very cool. Gardner describes marginal fashion publications as those that rework the conventions of mainstream fashion media and push back against the norms of industrial fashion publishing. So, what this means in practice is that marginal fashion publishing is where a great deal of the most interesting, critical, and artistic thinking about fashion actually happens. These publications offer insight into the theoretical and visual concerns of contemporary fashion and how fashion is communicated and understood right now. As librarians, we really can't afford to overlook publishing that comes from these margins. For our students in particular, this material is often more urgent and more relevant than anything coming from the mainstream, and it's an essential resource for understanding what the contemporary fashion landscape is doing. Um, the challenge for libraries, therefore, lies in the collecting, maintaining, and storing of this material, and it throws up some really difficult practical questions. Limited print runs means that collection decisions often have to be made quickly, broadly, and sometimes with incomplete information. So without that anchoring text, if we're referring back to Bart, it can be really hard to assess the significance of a publication before it sells out and it's just gone forever. On the screen is a flip through of the second issue of Nuts magazine, a fashion focused but largely photographic publication launched in 2023, and no relation, I should say, to the more famous Lads mag of the early 2000s. Printed entirely in black and white on non-glossy paper and with its focus on street style and everyday clothing, it feels very anti-fashion in its presentation. It's quite an unusual object. We do have both issues in our collection, though I'll be honest, that's more a stroke of luck than careful planning. And that raises a question I don't think there's a clean answer to yet. How do you look at the first issue of something and know that it's going to be significant? This opens on to a broader set of challenges that I suspect many of us grapple with. Can we realistically aim for completeness with publications like this? Is it appropriate to collect isolated issues? And how do we build weeding and retention policies around material that doesn't behave like everything else on our shelves? The honest answer is that we can't, not fully. Like artist books, marginal fashion publications are making a case for themselves as an entirely different category of object, one that doesn't behave like traditional library stock. Which brings me back to something that Bart said. The magazine is not just a record of fashion, but also is the mechanism through which fashion is created. It's through the magazine that fashion is presented, communicated, disseminated, and understood. And if that mechanism is changing shape, if the contemporary fashion publication is becoming something stranger, more various, more resistant to categorization, then that tells us something important about what fashion itself is becoming. And if that's the case, then libraries that want to genuinely support fashion education and research have no choice but to follow. As the mode in which fashion is expressed shifts, so too must the collections that we build and the frameworks that we use to manage them. As an example of how to collect, curate, and contextualize this kind of material, we should turn to Visionaire. It's an art and fashion hybrid publication that has been publishing in this highly visual, multi-format manner since 1991, and is really the originator of this kind of artistic turn in fashion publishing. At AUB, we started collecting this very late on, so a lot of the early issues we can no longer source. Completeness is an impossibility for us at this stage. There have also been no new issues of Visionaire since 2020, so we can currently effectively treat it as a closed run. I also feel I'm right in complaining it is an absolute nightmare to store because it is so divergent in the way it is produced. But the thing is that the value of Visionaire as a collection has never really been about having a complete run on the shelf or about it being an active publication reporting on current fashion trends. Its value lies instead in what it demonstrates about the relationship between fashion and image making, and in what it offers students as a concept to think with and through which to approach the idea of fashion publishing as a whole. And I think that gives us a model for how we approach other marginal fashion publications. Significance rather than completeness needs to be our goal. These publications represent an opportunity to build collections that are distinctive and that give students direct access to material they will not find in generalist libraries or bookstores. Here are a few images of Visionaire from our collection, and I would like to spend our final minute showing you some of the physical items that I've just brought into the room here with me. So if I just, sorry, if I just stop my share, you can see me hopefully full screen, or is that Leah? Got me. So many just to give you an idea of how resistant this material is to sitting neatly on the shelves and what fashion librarians are increasingly up against as publications that enter this conceptual space. Many Visionaire issues are things like this. They are very more object-based. They are less magazines and more toys, a jacket, a set of books, pop-ups, or indeed little binoculars to view slides through in increasingly beautiful boxes. Others feel slightly more conventionally magazine-like in that they collect glossy fashion editorial imagery, but they're produced unbound, loose leaf in boxes and folders, which fundamentally then changes the reader's relationship to them. So over here, this is issue 1 of Visionaire, and is a folder with a lovely rose on the front with just completely loose leaf fashion illustrations. These were done by Ruben Toledo, and photography, just in a loose leaf folder on completely different paper stocks. And then there are some that are simply produced at scale, like this, which is to angle this rather large issue behind me. The deluxe version of this stands at 7 feet tall. We've got the 4-foot one here. The deluxe version holds the world record for the largest magazine ever produced. When I teach with this material, I begin by presenting it in context as part of a continuum of fashion publishing, as a marker of how the fashion magazine continually reinvents its own modes of expression, legitimizes itself as an object, and as an example of how fashion publishing is transforming in the digital era. So perhaps as specialist arts librarians, we really are better placed than most to recognise that when a fashion publication stops behaving like a regular magazine and starts doing stuff like this, that's usually a sign that something really interesting is happening. And maybe that's all the sign that we need to start collecting it.
Thank you so much, Susie. It's always a treat to see Visionaire. To keep us moving along, our next speaker is José.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is José López Blanco. I'm one of the academic librarians at the University of South Wales. I currently look after the creative industries as one of my portfolio. In my portfolio, I've got quite a large portfolio of subjects, so I'm not solely a creative industries librarian, but it's one area I took over a year ago, so I'm quite new to this area. So I introduced a series of webinars called the Creative Researchers here at the University of South Wales. So I'm going to discuss a little bit about it. So I'm going to start by, hold on, let me move this. Yeah, I'm going to start looking at why we've introduced the Creative Researchers program. I'm going to discuss the overview of content, and then I'm going to have some reflections about it, about where I thought the program was successful or what could be changed and so forth. First of all, a little bit about the university. The University of South Wales is a multi-campus university. The creative industries live in our Cardiff campus. And just to let you know, really our creative industries is very much applied arts. So we've got games design, advertising, arts and well-being, visual effects, interior design, marketing, fashion. So that's really the kind of subjects that we have here at our university. So why we've decided to create the Creative Researchers program? First of all, at our university, we offer one-to-one support. Is one of our, like the librarians, is one of our offers. Apart from the in curriculum teaching, we also offer one-to-one support. And one of the things we've noticed, or I've noticed, is the lack of engagement regarding one-to-one support from students in the creative industries. So I don't get as many bookings from students in those areas. Secondly, we're thinking of new areas of support. Our university is going through quite a bit of change regarding our curriculum and the kind of curriculum we offer to students. And as librarians, we're thinking that we need new areas of support. We need to maybe think about going beyond the usual library teaching of teaching databases, teaching, what we would consider the traditional information literacy skills, and maybe go a little bit beyond that, like expand on the concept of information literacy. Maybe thinking about helping students become more career ready. We were also thinking about ways of promoting our collections of services. This is why we've thought that by creating a new series of webinars, we could use that as a way to promote the types of collections we have, the types of services. My thinking was, well, I can use this to promote our collections, but also I can maybe encourage students to book appointments with me. Now, a lot of this came as a result of a really nice arts librarianship course that I did last year through Library Juice Academy. I don't know you know this company. They're an American company, and they offer quite a lot of librarianship courses. They're quite short. This one was a month, and they're quite flexible. And I quite liked what I learned in that course last year. So really was inspired by that course. So let's have a look at the contents. It's really a series of 6 webinars. They're all quite short. They're all online as well. So they're all online seminars, and 30 minutes. I wanted to keep them quite short. Lunchtime, so they were all at 12:30, and they were quite well attended, actually. The first one was why research. So in that one was really an introduction to the webinar series, and we had a discussion about why research is important in the creative process. So I discussed quite a few books. I also put together a Padlet where I asked students to share their ideas about why research is important, even as a creative student. Then the next 2 webinars were perhaps the ones I felt more comfortable with, because it was about primary and secondary resources. So this is something I've done countless of times. So yeah, primary resources was really about discussing where to find still and moving images. So that was an opportunity to promote our magazines, for example, also key databases, Bob for movies and films, and also Canopy. And then secondary resources, again, another opportunity to promote our books on our databases. The next ones are the ones where I went a little bit beyond my comfort zone, I have to say. So I did do one about copyright, basics of copyright. So in that one, I introduced students to key terms. So for example, the idea of intellectual property, moral rights, legal rights and duties, licensing as well. So that was quite interesting. And in the reflections, I'll tell you a little bit more about what interested students more from the copyright session. And then the next one, digital preservation. This is the one, again, where I definitely went beyond my comfort zone. I talk about obsolescence, file formats, and migration. So how files become obsolete, and how you need to think about ways to curate those files so that digital files, so that they are future proof. So I discussed that. And then finally, market research, because I was thinking about the idea of creative students being ready to sell their services, sell their work. So again, we had a bit of discussion about, is art business or is it not a business? And after that, I discussed tools to find out about consumer trends and industry statistics. As part of that, we created a page, and I'll show you a little bit of that in a minute. I'm still developing it. As you can see, that's the Padlet where we discuss the importance of research. Also, you can see a little bit of what we've discussed as part of digital preservation. I'll show you now in a minute. And finally, some reflections. The formal feedback, I did ask for feedback through a survey, has been quite neutral. I didn't get a lot of feedback, so I'll try again next year. My plan is really to deliver this next year. And then the informal feedback was quite positive. It was the right length, so 30 minutes is the right length, but the content was too much. I think I tried to deliver too much content in the digital preservation session, for example. I do need to simplify the concepts. The students were relating to copyright. They were more interested in actually how they can protect their own work rather than using work by others. So I do need to make sure that I include more of that. And then finally, I do need to include something about AI, which I didn't this time round. I'll probably do that next year. And then very quickly, this is the page I'm developing. As you can see, it's still in, basically, I'm just still building it. So just as a page accompanying the session, so I can send it with an email. Yeah, you can see a little bit about what I discussed for digital preservation. And there you go, that's me, thank you. I'm just going to put my email there. Thank you very much, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jose. I don't know about anyone else, but I would have liked to attend a program like this as a student, and I'm very sad that I didn't. So I will leave questions until the very end. So we will move on to our next speaker, which is Alan Turner.
There we are, I think we're ready to go. Okay, so my name's Alan Turner. I'm a subject librarian at the Arts University at Bournemouth, and I've been here for about 20 years. So I'm an AUB lifer, very long time. Yeah, and I've been basically the subject librarian for most of the media type courses around that time. Photography is one of them. Actually, I've missed off the list there, actually, which is one of them. Oh no, it's at the bottom. Basically, I'm here to talk about the Japanese Photo Library at AUB. You can just Google AUB Library, Japanese Photo Library, and you should get to the website. So if you want to browse that as I'm talking through, feel free to. If you want to visit AUB Photo Library or anything that Susie, my colleague, has talked about, the special collections at AUB, then you can do that. We welcome any visitor. You're all welcome. Don't all come at once though, please, because parking is limited. If you do want to visit, just email myself or the library if I'm on leave. Then someone will get back to you about the best way to kind of park. Over the summer, I would like to think we've got some parking available, so just please email us and let us know you're coming down to use the collection. You can meet with myself or Susie, and we're happy to show you around. I'm going to talk today very quickly about the Japanese Photo Library at AUB, and touching on how it kind of came about, and then things that we've been doing with it, or things that I've been doing with it, and the way we've integrated that into the curriculum at AUB or different courses. But ultimately, I think hopefully what a lot of you will take from this is different areas that I'm not kind of covering specifically, but essentially you can take from that in relation to special collections. And these like four main things are ways of approaching special collection to kind of expand a new, this is very new, only 170 odd books, and it's only a few years old. But these are all things that I've done myself and worked on. So one is making connections, so actually connecting with colleagues. Some of this might sound a bit obvious, but I think it should be helpful to you, both internal and external. Looking for opportunities, and that's also public opportunities. So I've talked to members of the public and met them in particular galleries about the Japanese Photo Library at AUB, and it was one of the main reasons that it was set up initially, which I'll mention later on. Looking for opportunities in the curriculum as well. So looking at learning outcomes of particular courses, looking at courses that are coming in, new courses that may be able to use the collection and engaging with them in some way, but also giving some student ownership to that. So there's a couple of sessions that I talk about that we've used the Japanese Photo Library in, and in both times we've always got the students involved with the collection. So it's not been necessarily run by myself. And the last one is researchers. So again, there's going to be researchers all across the UK that may be interested in the Japanese Photo Library. So there's certain elements of kind of outreach that I've done to kind of make it more visible. This talk being part of that in many ways. And also we have PhD students here at AUB that are studying the collection too. So it's making them aware of it as well. Okay. So just talk very quickly about Arts University Bournemouth. Most of you will probably know about it. Some of you may not. This is our drawing studio, which is designed by Sir Peter Cook. It's worth a visit to AUB alone just to see the drawing studio. So if you do come down, we will show you that as well. This is the internal shot of it. It's a really nice building. That's where we're located in Bournemouth, so on the south coast of the UK. We are not Bournemouth University. I like to say that. I say that to everyone I meet because very often we're confused with Bournemouth University, and it tends to be because of our geographic location. So essentially, Bournemouth University and Arts University Bournemouth are just separated by this road here, this line I'm drawing. Okay, so this is where we meet to have our gang fights with the Bournemouth University librarians in this area, no man's land here. Okay, no, we actually get on really well. But if you were to visit, we are a completely separate university, and lots of people get us confused. So you go and park in Bournemouth University and then come across to Arts University Bournemouth. So please come to Arts University Bournemouth. We are not Bournemouth University. Okay, just some data about Bournemouth Film School. So Bournemouth Film School is also part of the Arts University Bournemouth. It's quite a prestigious film school going back many years. That's part of what I do as well, and we're looking to expand that. We've got loads of funding in that area as well. I'm one of the top UK arts and design specialists in the UK, and also our library is very good as well. So you'll hear me going on about the NSS scores over the past 15 years, possibly. We've been in the top 10, 15, longer than that, okay? But yeah, we hit a high mark on that NSS score, question 20. Okay, so onto the Japanese photo book collection. The origins of that are all down to this particular person, Dr. Jelena Stokovic. And she was a senior lecturer in critical theory at Oxford Brookes. She was teaching at AUB. But just after the actual funding was put in for the Japanese photo book collection, they left the Arts University Bournemouth. So it was kind of left to me to kind of keep building and keeping it going. And it is very much down to Jelena that it was initially set up. So they approached me initially with an email and just said, actually, I'm doing research into surrealism photography and Japanese photography, and I would like to start a collection at AUB. So that's where the idea initially came from, and she approached me. And then we applied to Japan Foundation and for some money in 2020, and that was myself, Jelena, with the help of Valerie Lodge, who's an AUB research manager at AUB, and that was successful. So we got initial funding. And that was just around lockdown or just before. So it kind of put things on hold in a way. And then I've continued to spend on the collection going through to 2025. Okay. Then also we applied to the more recently, so this is just very recently, we just got some more funding for the Metropolitan Centre of Far Eastern Studies. Okay, and again, that comes down to my connections with the Japan Library Group. Actually, I wasn't aware of that until I connected and outreached to them. Okay, currently there's 170 odd books. This is a nice picture of our reading room that we have the books. We had the books in. This was during lockdown when it was kind of everything, all the strange things were going on there in terms of access. So it was just, this is a picture of it sat in the reading room. The focus of it initially, it was in 3 areas. So it was looking at history of photography, Japanese photography, with a focus on women photographers, Japanese women photographers as well. And it was very important that it was open to the public as well as students and researchers. The main themes that it covered or has ended up covering are quite expansive, given that it's only 170 plus books. Okay, so many of the books touch on the themes covered on this slide. And as you can see, it's quite comprehensive. In terms of relevance to the teaching, all of the courses potentially at AUB could use the Japanese Photo Library collection, obviously within the visual arts. but certainly more pertinent to photography, obviously, and film, and the more media-based subjects. Teaching opportunities. This is something I talk to tutors about all the time, is looking for teaching opportunities. So you've got the history of Japanese photography. You could bring in ideas around Orientalism and discuss that with students in terms of teaching, cultural appropriation, and also assumptions that they may have about Japanese visual culture, which are quite prevalent. Okay. Also, the genres cover multiple genres. So again, this is something that allows the tutors to pick and choose from the collection what they want to teach about, or opportunities for teaching. These are two examples of sessions that we've got photography to run themselves. So again, we very much handed it over to the students. So session one is just a pop-up exhibition. You just book a room. You have basically for a lunchtime, or even half a day if you wanted to have longer, and essentially just have a display of the photo books laid out with themed keywords next to each of the books, with content warnings as well, because some of the content can be offensive potentially, but also accompanying information, so you're giving some context to the photo books as well. So it's just like a little mini gallery. Session two is more interesting. So this is like a speed dating format, which I know has been done previously. This is a slight development of it, but basically you book a room, and then for 2 hours you have plus 15 minutes just to describe the activity. You have 24 books on 24 tables. You can book tickets for people to attend from between 24 to 48 people. So you can have 2 people sat at each table, if you like a speed dating with a book. Each of the tables has a book on it. And then you allow 5 minutes for each of the books, ring the bell or the buzzer, then everyone moves to the next book for the next 5 minutes, discusses it with someone else and looks at the book and talks through it. You can allow people to leave notes next to those books as well, or not. So you can give some text and some context to it. And maybe if you've got enough time, you could run one session without the text, and then at the next session, run it with the text. So it changes the meaning of what the students are discussing or looking at. So these are just 2 really interesting ideas that we've explored. Okay, so in terms of outreach, I've done talks as well for the Japan photo book evening with Pompey Darkroom at the Espex Gallery in Portsmouth. That was in 2024, and that was through contact with the senior lecturer at AUB, and Patty Garl Holmes. And then I contacted Akira Harano as well, and also talked to the Japan Library Group, so a group of universities that have very specific Japanese library courses about the collection as well. So this, again, makes everyone aware that researchers can come down and have a look at the collection. Okay, so future, basically continued expansion. So we're looking at budgets, which is a problem across the board for everyone, I'm sure. Maybe looking at buying some of these more historic photo books, and then also preservation. So actually initially it was made a collection that could be used, but I think looking forward we might need to preserve some of the collection due to the financial cost of it actually, and the growing cost. The price of photo books increases quite rapidly after they've been out of print. And that's it. I think it was about 10 minutes, just over.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alan. I love that speed dating session. That sounds great. And it's so wonderful to hear that the collection is open to the public as well as the students and staff at AUB. I think that accessibility is so important. Wonderful, thank you. And on to our final speaker today, Ludo.
To introduce myself, I'm Ludo Sébire. I work at UWE Bristol with Leah and Morena, and I think there's a couple of other colleagues from UWE here today. And I'm currently the Learning Development Manager for Inclusive Practice, moving away from what I did for nearly 10 years, which was looking after the College of Art, Technology environment. So working with Leah and Morena on our Barashton library, supporting different subject areas. We thought it might be useful to share a couple of things that has happened to us in terms of our collection. So we offer, as many libraries, a wonderful collection offering different perspectives. And from time to time, we get students or staff who do complain about perceived offensive material. And since I've started to work in libraries, it has always happened. But in the last two or 3 years, we had, I guess, more serious complaints and that were more difficult to deal with, and made us really think and reflect on what is our approach and how do we respond to that. So that's what I'm going to do today, is to give you an overview of what has happened, what we've done, and what we've learned related to those complaints. I will keep them anonymous, as you can imagine, but even in terms of the nature of the complaint, because as it is recorded, and I'm quite conscious that staff or colleagues who may have been involved in that process may not want to be spotted. Could you move on to the next slide, please, Leah? So, yeah, just a bit of context. As we know, libraries are not neutral. We actually did an ARLIS conference on that topic in 2021, I think. As I said early on, we do offer a wide range of perspectives on our shelves and electronically as well, and that's quite important as well to remember. So we've got books, journals, magazines, special collections, Visionaire, etc. All those collections offer different perspectives, different themes. Some of our books may contain some old ideas, way of thinking. Our DOE classification system is old-fashioned, we all know that. But we also offer some new ideas that also could be thought-provoking and potentially offensive. So the complaint I'm going to talk about is related to one of the, sadly, too many international conflicts that we are experiencing at the moment. So could you move on to the next slide, please, Leah? Thank you. So just to give you a bit of background, so we were approached by a member of staff who complained about one of our publications on display in a library at Barrow-Ashton. The complaint wasn't just for them, it was on behalf of them and students who belong to a specific community. They thought that publication was very offensive and was potentially raising concern around how students would react to it, one way or the other. So we've agreed to meet. So I met with that colleague, and we had a long chat, listening to their views on why they think it was offensive and problematic to have that publication on our shelves. It is highly emotional conflict. It has affected many communities and in very, very heavy way. So we had to use quite a lot of tact and listening carefully to what people said, and what we agreed to do at the end of this meeting is for me to basically look into it and see how would we respond to that specific issue. So we had a chat with the team. We also had a chat. Had a chat with our Director of Teaching and Learning for the School of Arts. I also talked to our Head of Collections in terms of collection policies around offensive materials, and also looked at also the university's website, the CLIP guidance around it's mostly for public libraries, but around offensive material, offensive speakers, etc., and of course our UWE freedom of speech policy. So I really do spend some time exploring all of this, trying to explore different ideas. Do we want to put stickers? Do we want to put labels? Do we want to do this or that? And that, at the end, what we've decided to do was actually, one, not to censor, not to put labels. And the reason is we didn't want to show that we were censoring content, because that's not our purpose, that we don't censor. We all know what happened in the United States with lots of censorship and the impact it has on people, perspective on people's life. So we don't really want to censor. And we had good justification for that, and a good background, good support from the CLIP guidance, the UWE, not just the UWE, the freedom of speech, basically legislation that makes it quite hard to decide to censor if something doesn't break the law. Yes, it can be offensive, but basically we don't have a right not to be offended. So we thought really carefully about this, and the decision was made to keep the publication on our shelves, to put it back on our shelves. So our decision was, during this investigation, we thought we would still give access to the content, but not to have it on our shelves. So we moved the publication in our office, but it was still searchable and visible via our library catalog. So we didn't lock it away. It was still available. So we decided to put it back on the shelves. I met with our colleague about it, explain why we did that. They were not very happy about it, that's for sure. I suggested the next step for them would be to maybe get in touch with our equality, diversity, and inclusivity team, just to raise the issue if they wanted to. So I offered a next step for them, and they did, actually. And we wrote I wrote a report that I shared with our director for the library services, as well as the School of Art exec team. We had several meetings, and it led to actually some training session with the School of Arts. So yeah, could you move on to the next slide, Leah? And I'm just conscious of the time. So what happened next is, yeah, as I said, the issue was escalated. So the staff listened to me and reached out to the EDI team, who got back to me as well, and I shared the report with them. The report was shared with our legal team for some advice, and they said it was absolutely, my answer was absolutely legal and absolutely fine, and they were recommended us not to change it. But we did make some recommendation, which was we are still going to apply. We haven't applied it yet, but the recommendation are in terms of looking at our procedures. So when a student or staff complain, how do we deal with those issues? And some training around freedom of expression, which I think is quite essential for everybody. And it's linked to a fact that we had a second complaint 2 years later around the same conflict, but the other side. And it was about a book we had on our shelves. So it was really, in a way, it was good that we had the report, but it also reminded us that we really need to crack on with our next steps, which we hadn't done because we had a restructure last year, so it took us a lot of energy. So now we have the new structure is in place, and we're going to look at how we could implement those training sessions. So if you could move on to the last slide, and I'm going to wrap it up quickly, sorry. So I just thought I would share some reflection. I mean, it's not like very deep reflection, but nonetheless, it sort of reaffirms things that I do believe in, and I guess most of us do, that we are not a place to censor. Well, anyway, I think even if we were to go to censor or put labels on books, then we have the whole electronic world, which is very difficult to manage. So it was a way to reaffirm our principle of not censoring, considering the support for freedom of expression, which is essential. Maybe reclaim it a little bit, so because at the moment when you say freedom of expression, it does sounds like one political spectrum, but actually freedom of speech is for everybody and everyone, and that's essential. The other thing that I thought was really crucial, and I did mention that to our colleague, is we are a university library, and we are looking at developing our critical thinking skills, not just for students, but for ourselves as well. And you can only do that if you are exposed to different perspectives and ideas. And I guess the key thing is listening. And I think listening is what we maybe don't do enough, listening to other people who may not share the same point of view as you. But if you don't listen, then you can't have a conversation. And if you can't have a conversation, nothing ever changes. So let's talk and listen to each other. So that's it from me. So I will welcome any questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ludo. Obviously very essential and difficult work, and also an illustration of the ever-changing world and therefore professional landscape that we are working in. We do have 10 minutes left, so we do have space for a few questions if anybody would like to ask one in the chat or over their microphone. We do have a question in the chat from Lauren, a question for Susie. Thank you for a fascinating talk. It really rang true. Do you have any top tips for collecting marginal fashion publications, where to look online, vendors, etc.?
That is a fantastic question. I like to, as best as possibly can, support local specialist shops. Our closest specialist magazine shop is in Bath. It's called Galleria. They are magic. But I'm from up north originally as well, and there's fantastic magazine stores in Leeds, in Manchester, Rare Mags in Stockport. There's just some really fantastic places who are doing that incredible work of identifying these publications as they start to be produced. So you can see the ones that are starting to filter out right as the first and second issues are published. There's a wonderful French publisher called KD Press. They produce some incredible material as well. And very fortunately, a couple of years ago, I was able to go to the International Library of Fashion Research in Oslo, which was funded by ARLIS as part of their travel fund, which was wonderful. Meeting the librarians there gave me some idea about the contacts that they have in order to just stay ahead of the game as far as you possibly can. But at the end of the day, funding's an issue. The collection retention policies are an issue, and so sometimes it's really hard to be able to look at these things and make those judgments as quickly as we can. But yeah, it's great websites, great shops. That does a lot of the work for me.
Wonderful. Got a quick follow-up question from Aoife. Do you think marginal fashion publications could start to become the priority physical subscription acquisitions in art libraries?
I would like to think so. I think it would be a tremendous amount of work for our poor people who manage our subscriptions. And I do make hard work for our colleague here who does that, because they just can't be got in the usual way. You can't just subscribe and then it'll turn up. You really have to be on top of it and checking the websites. We subscribe to a wonderful one called Candy. It's a magazine of transversal style. It's produced once a year-ish. So you're just constantly checking these websites. I think it's a lot of work, but I think it's useful and important work to be doing, especially to adequately continue to support courses in fashion communication, but also graphic design, creative direction, these types of courses as well. So yeah, maybe, but it's a lot of work.
Yeah, very much so. Thank you, Sue. We've got a question for José from Kelsey. How often are you invited to give in-curriculum library sessions? Do you think this is something that could work in person? Or is the flexibility of it being a webinar at lunchtime a benefit for engagement?
Thank you, Kelsey, and thank you for the comment. So for most of my courses, I'm invited at least to the first year and then the final year for dissertations, or the final year at the end of the second year when they're doing the proposals. I think in person, I think the sessions about primary and secondary resources would work, especially primary resources where I can show them materials, print materials. However, I think there is a lot to be said about the flexibility of it being online, because then it means that they can just join there. Now, our students are not on campus all the time. And to be honest, the copyright and the digital preservation ones and the market research ones they'll work really well in online. But yes, with the primary resources, maybe I could do maybe a follow-up, or maybe an invitation, would come and see our primary resources in person. That would be maybe something I could do. But yes, thank you. I hope that answered the question.
Lovely. Thank you, Jose. And then maybe one space for one more question for Ludo from Aoife. Were the books in question relatively recent acquisitions? Has it raised questions for you about what and how you acquire?
Cool. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, the first complaint was around a magazine, which we still have, is essential. We actually liaise with that program, the program that use it the most, because it was on the first time that publication had been caught up with accusation of some accusation. So we were really, we thought about it, but it is an essential publication for graphic design, and therefore we thought we need to keep it. And again, we don't want to censor. The second complaint was about a book. So I wasn't working at Bauer anymore, but maybe Leah, you can say more about this one, because I think you know about this one. And the complaint was actually, the complaint was left, it was a post-it left in a book. But to your question, how does it make us think about how we acquire things? I think, I think it does. I mean, maybe Morena and Leah can talk a bit more about this, because I don't work with Bauer Ashton in the same way. But I guess you have that in mind when you purchase material. But at the same time, if it's something that is needed, so if it was requested by an academic staff or even by a student, our policy is really very much to invite all students and staff to suggest content. So if it has been suggested by an academic staff, or student, we will probably purchase it. I think if it was really offensive, we would probably have a discussion with who has requested it, but we won't say no straight away. We will probably have a discussion. Yeah, hopefully that helps. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Ludo. I think one other thing on that, because I work at Bauer Ashton, where the collection is, that the complaints were about, I think some of the discussions that we had sort of informally in the office with other library staff were about sort of diversifying and expanding the collection rather than censoring and getting rid of something. So making like conscious efforts to make it a more balanced collection, if that's what the complaints are suggesting, rather than taking something away.
One more thing, because I think that the second complaint was anonymous, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's a shame, because actually the way the student complained about that book, what they wrote was pure critical thinking, and in a way you think, well, this is what this is about. We are there to make you think and make you develop your arguments, and that, in a way, that was a good complaint to have, and it's a shame that we haven't been able to talk to that student specifically about the complaint.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Ludo. Thank you again to all of our speakers. Lovely selection and variety of talks for us today. And thank you, of course, to everybody that attended and supporting our first event and sharing your thoughts in the chat and in your questions. We would love for this to be the first in a series and open it out beyond the Southwest to celebrate work going on everywhere. So if you have an idea for a lightning talk or any feedback on this first event, please do look out for the form we'll be circulating afterwards, and share any thoughts or proposals for future talks that you have with us there. There we go. Thank you again, everybody, and I wish you a lovely rest of your day.